After the breakup, I discovered that my ex was a serial cheater. Story 1. Found out ex was a serial cheater after breakup helped me make sense of it. For the last 10 years, I've been in a relationship. The fact that I wished to end the relationship numerous times was due to my feelings for him as a family member. However, we were very different people. He was someone with little energy and motivation who preferred to stay at home, whereas I was someone who was extremely energetic and ambitious who preferred to be outside. But I'd always chosen to stay, partly because I had so much on my plate that I didn't want to deal with meeting new people, and partly because he checked all the core boxes that I knew my friends were having problems identifying in other people. It's important to note that I realized that partnerships are a two-way street, but he was so passive that everything always appeared to be my option, which is why I'm presenting this as if it were my decision rather than ours. As another crucial reason in our eventual separation, the fact that I was only carrying the two of us was a consideration. He was really pleasant, supportive, and trustworthy in addition to being stunning and, according to many, he was a great guy, although I considered him to be too low energy to find him appealing in the same sense. The truth is that he was the only person in whom I had complete confidence, as were many of my friends and family members as well. He had a passive demeanor, which I found irritating, but when combined with his sympathy, he gave the impression that he couldn't possibly hurt you. When I was in 5th grade, I happened to catch him on a date with another girl. Due to the fact that it was a complicated fabrication, this should have triggered an alarm. The fact that he had cheated on me left me sad, and I couldn't believe it. He, on the other hand, made every effort to convince me that it was a one-time incident. Let's fast forward 4 to 5 years to the present. Following an unsuccessful effort at an open relationship, at my request, and after realizing that this was not the right relationship for me, I ultimately broke the connection, and probably for him. To be quite honest, I was more concerned about losing my best friend than I was about feeling bad about abandoning him. However, despite making a promise to be best friends, we ended up breaking up, again, driven by me. We stayed good friends. After that, we stayed close friends for the next 2 years. Despite the fact that we had a convoluted network of friends, we were able to sort it out. Following our divorce, I met someone who made me feel true joy and love for the first time since I was a child, but I felt guilty for being happy because every time I spoke to my ex-boyfriend, he was depressed and complaining, and if asked about his love life, he would say, "Oh, you know me, I don't even know where to go, I'm not doing anything." When I confided in a close friend who is familiar with him about my guilt about being delighted, he responded with, "What are you talking about?" When I was with him last week, he was having with 2 other women at the same time. He, on the other hand, insisted that he was not seeing anybody. He'd always been like this, terribly low on energy and usually bringing me bad and unpleasant news. Like, I'd be the first person he'd contact if anything went wrong, and things always went wrong for him, so I'd have to come to his rescue. And then I'd have to find out the fantastic news for myself. Also, I have to confess that I was always more successful than him in getting the things I desired, and I felt bad about it and had to minimize my success since he was struggling to find work at all. I was always there for him and helped him apply for school and employment. So around 2 years after our separation, I was feeling bad because I had never been happier in my relationship and my ex, well, he was still whining and miserable. And he also began seeing a for whom he was developing feelings, and I suppose she wasn't accessible, so he was just very sad. I was surprised to see his new type for background. I'm a feminist artist, so simply a different kind, but I was relieved that he had someone to talk to so he wouldn't bring his sorrow to me. I kept our relationship going because I felt awful for him, even though I was weary of all the sadness and negativity he brought. Then a distant acquaintance, his buddy's ex, came to me and revealed she had slept with him 6 to 7 years before we split up, before I found out he was on a date. Given all of this and some additional background, I'm 100% certain he was a serial cheater and slept with numerous others while he was with me, with no protection. So here's what I think. I'm disgusted because he was inconsiderate of my health. I'm surprised because I believed I was skilled at reading people, and I can't believe he's a cheater. I had several moments when I suspected anything was wrong, seeing his co-workers flirting with him acting foolish, and me gaslighting myself into believing I was insecure. I'm upset because I wanted to break up with him so many times, and even when we were in an open relationship or broke up, it was all my fault. Why would he not break up when he had so many chances? I'm also upset since he compromised my health by, for example, failing to inform me of the herpes event. I'm perplexed since I stopped passionately loving him before we even broke up and haven't had any feelings towards him since. So I'm not as emotionally affected as you would be if you were in love or in a relationship. But I'm also at a loss for words to express how I feel. I'd love to hear your thoughts and how you can assist me understand how I'm feeling and how I can go on and trust again. I'm still angry, particularly since he's broken up the dynamics of my buddy group because I don't want to see him. I just recently discovered this subreddit and learned the phrase serial cheater from it. and it has been really beneficial to recognize this as archetypal behavior. Story 2. I cheated on my ex-husband and still feel like a horrible person. I got engaged to my high school sweetheart when I was 19 years old. He was a jerk to me. He routinely cheated on me by other females, potential blowjob, and even asked my closest friend for nude images. I had reached this stage when I was falling out of love with him. I intended to depart in August when I began college. However, I discovered I was pregnant. He was emotionally and psychologically abusive to me, saying things like, "I never truly loved you until we had our daughter." I began working when my daughter was 3 months old. I got pals with a co-worker who was ostensibly married but divorced. My fiancé informed me one night that he no longer loved me or wanted to be with me. In my sad condition, I contacted a co-worker to vent and weep with me. We ended up having when he came over. The following day, fiancé and I reconciled, and I informed him about a work buddy and I kissed, but that was all. I told him I had emotions for a co-worker and that I thought I should leave my job. Fiancé advised me to stop talking to him and just get on with it. So every time my fiancé and I fought, I'd contact a work buddy and we'd end up having. I ended myself falling in love with this man, but the guilt ate me alive, so I'd ended at random till my next battle for my fiancé. I got married to my fiancé around 3 months into the affair. I know, foolish, but in my 19-year-old head, I believed if I simply married him, I'd be able to stop having emotions for my work buddy, and 3 months later I informed my husband about the affair. I was hoping he'd leave me, but he seemed to want to sort things out. So I canceled my meeting with a co-worker and chose to talk things out with my spouse. I found out I was pregnant 2 weeks later. Husband was, for understandable reasons, he was horrible to me. He phoned a work friend's wife and told her everything. According to the evidence, they were never separated or divorced. My heart was torn to pieces. My colleague and I made the decision to end our relationship for good and concentrate on our marriages. He informed me that if the child turned out to be his by some miracle we weren't having, so I knew it was workmates, he would stay, but if it turned out to be someone else's, he would go. As it turned out, the child was born, and a paternity test indicated that he was not my husband's child. The spouse, on the other hand, a jerk to me. I was constantly referred to as terrible, disgusting names and was made to feel inferior. I was no longer authorized to work, and as a punishment, he ordered me to notify both our families and acquaintances about the situation. He, on the other hand, cherished my son as if he were his own. I stayed with him out of a sense of regret. The affair ended in my husband leaving me 4 years later. We had 3 children at the time. My oldest and youngest were his. Our middle kid was my ex-work pal, but we were able to get a divorce and are now both happily remarried and in good health in their new partnerships. Since it keeps me up at night thinking about how many people I've damaged and the lives I've destroyed, I've decided that cheating will never be an option for me again. I'm still baffled as to how or why I allowed myself to become that person in the first place. It was just something I needed to do to get it off my chest. Please be understanding, as this occurred 8 years ago and I was able to keep my sweet, handsome, and great child out of the fight. Thank you for bearing with me while I vented about something that continues to occupy my life. Story 3. I, 32 male, am in love with my former sister-in-law, 27 female. I'm now at the point where I can't take it any longer. I've been in love with this lady for a long time, maybe a couple of years, and I'm not sure if I should end it or try to create anything with her. I met my ex-sister wives when I was 23 years old, and the connection grew swiftly, and by 26 I had a son and a daughter and had married. However, my ex-wife had an affair within months of our marriage, and to make matters worse, the guy she strayed with had gotten her addicted to heroin. After I confronted her about it, she stated she was going to seek treatment, but she instead fled in the middle of the night. I haven't heard from her in 4 years, and the last I heard, she is still with that man and homeless in Las Vegas. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but with my emphasis on keeping it together for the kids, I don't have the time or desire to track her down after what she did. In the end, I got a divorce in my absence. After the incident, though, I had a really nice connection with my in-laws. Every other weekend, my kids stay with their grandparents on that side, and they still treat me like a son. I still attend to Christmas parties and well liked by the family. Nobody speaks about my ex anymore, mostly to avoid worrying my children. My eldest, my son, is deeply affected by his mother's departure. He's now 9, and I had to get him counseling when he told me he wished his mother was dead. She had been verbally abusive at the end when he was around 5 or 6 years old. Anyway, in the year after my ex's departure, her sister and her boyfriend began visiting the kids often. They knew I worked a lot and would babysit as practice since they wanted to have their own children. My kids adore them and have been spoiled by them, which I didn't mind since we could all need a little cheer. They married and were madly in love. Her spouse, on the other hand, was killed in a job accident soon after the birth of their daughter. As one can expect, it has been tremendously difficult and unpleasant for everyone concerned. I followed my sister's lead and started taking her kid to give her time to herself when things were too much to handle or she needed alone time. She's been in bereavement counseling for a few years, but she still wears her ring and says she can't picture ever dating again. I speak to her about him a lot and she's come a long way, but she's still madly in love with him. I can't comprehend the suffering she's going through. We've been a more consistent presence in each other's life over the previous 2 years. My kids adore their aunt, and I invite her over for supper at least twice a week. My daughter and her daughter have become close and like spending time together, so they have sleepovers. I've moved on from my ex, but the thought of dating someone as hazardous as their mother has kept me out of the dating world. I'm not sure when it occurred, but I gradually started to soften toward my Sil. She's a wonderful mother in light of what's happened to her. She's one of the nicest individuals I know, and her sense of humor constantly makes me smile and laugh. Then I realized I was physically drawn to her. I've always felt a little terrible about it since her late husband was a dear friend and she's clearly still in mourning, so I've kept it to myself. We've spent more time together since COVID began, since social alienation has caused us to lose touch with most other people. Nothing romantic has ever been addressed and I try not to flirt, but last week after the kids went to bed, I prepared us a few drinks, not enough to be drunk on, but she said she'd rather stay the night, so I took her sofa. This morning, I woke up to breakfast and the 4 of us felt like the kind of family I've always wanted. She even kissed my forehead, something she doesn't usually do. I still didn't say anything, but when she went, I discovered my kid in his room, calmly playing with his toys. I asked him if he was okay since he seemed upset. He tells me plainly, as only a child can, that he desires. Sil was his mother's name. I sat down with him and asked him why he felt that way, and he told me a long list of reasons, including her being polite to him and the fact that she never screams at him. He enjoys visiting her at his grandparents' house, and she enjoys drawing drawings with him, something I had no idea they did. By the end, my heart, which was already fluttering for this lady, had become much more tense. When I sent them off with their grandparents on a visit, I attempted to broach the matter with her parents to get a sense of how people might react. I made a joke about her and I behaving like a married couple at times, and they didn't laugh. They were sort of standoffish, nice, but either they know something or they don't approve. It's becoming too difficult for me to ignore or pretend it's not bothering me. I'm madly in love with her. Either I have to kill it and stop thinking about her, or I have to find a method to get past this position and tell her everything. If anybody out there has any advice on how to approach a widow, particularly one who is married to a buddy with this kind of aim, I'd be grateful. Update: oh my god, this actually blew out. First, thank you for all of the amazing prizes. I'd react to your posts, but they closed mine, which irritates me since I want to respond to as many people as possible. Thank you for all of your love and support. I'm in love with an angel and will keep you updated. Anyway, does anybody know of a subreddit where I could post this that won't get locked? I'm sorry that folks took the time to leave me messages and that I can't respond or communicate with them. When I checked this, I was like, holy hell, I need to get supper and the kids to bed. But if anybody could recommend a site to publish updates in the future where things aren't so stringent, I'd be grateful. First and foremost, I'd want to thank everyone who provided me advice on how to continue, as well as thoughts and things I may possibly say to my ex Sil. That's what I ended up doing. Shortly after I made the first post, I realized that my children were spending Sunday night at their grandparents' home and that they usually invite my niece, Sil's daughter, to join them. I permit these bi-weekly visits because I believe it is critical for them to establish a positive connection with their mother's parents. Sil, on the other hand, lets her kid go since she adores playing with my daughter, so I figured we'd both have a free night. Normally, I'd play a game or go to the gym an additional night, but I felt it would be the ideal time to Sil without the kids around. So I texted her, hey, kids are out this Sunday, was thinking you may like to have supper. It was a reasonably fancy restaurant that reopened for outside dining about 2 months ago. I never invite her out to dinner, and we're nearly never alone together unless there's a kid in the next room. She replies she'd love to, and my worry begins to set in since now I have to act on my emotions. When I inquire whether she'd rather meet at my house and take one vehicle or meet at the restaurant, she replies she'll come by my house first. I'm a little cleaner than usual, dressed up but not overdressed. She arrives, and my god, she's wearing a really gorgeous evening gown with makeup, not something she normally wears. You look really gorgeous. I had to have been slack-jawed for a second, haha. We make small conversation and congratulate one another on how we look, but I still don't have the courage to bring up the subject, and she isn't pressing it. Dinner was fantastic, and they had a live jazz-type ensemble performing. I will definitely return to this location. She says this is the first time she's truly had an adult social event that didn't include her kid in a few years, and I say it's about the same for me. We're laughing, joking, conversing, and casually caressing each other here and there. I can't seem to find my nerve, and I'm frightened of sabotaging this moment, so I simply settle for having fun. But as we're walking away, my mind and I'm like, it. And as we rise to return to the vehicle, I offer her my arm, and we stroll back to the car arm in arm, no awkwardness, no one noting it. I open her door and want to drive her back to her vehicle. She comes to a halt as I open the door. She urges me to stop and that she wants to kiss me, despite her apprehensive demeanor. There was no alcohol during dinner, therefore this is all her fault. So I drew her close and kissed her. I can't really put into words how fantastic it felt to finally touch her. Well, the kissing has been going on outside this restaurant for at least a half hour, with her leaning against my vehicle. When we eventually take a break, we exchange a few more romantic glances before getting in the vehicle and driving back to my house. I've never been happier than when she's holding my hand when I'm driving. I admit to her that I've had emotions for her for a long time, but I didn't want to frighten her away because of the horrific things we went through. She tells me she's been carrying a flame for nearly 6 months. I had gone on a few Tinder dates at the time, and since we were just friends, I detailed what a shambles those encounters were. She tells me that she became incredibly envious and irritated that I was seeing these females, and that it was about that time that she realized she had formed emotions for me. As it turned out, I didn't contact her because of her late husband, and she didn't approach me because she was scared I'd see too much of her sister, my ex-wife, in her and hate her for it. After we came home, I let her in, and we chose to resist the need to get right into bed and instead sat on the sofa hugging and chatting about what we needed to do to make this a functional relationship. There were a few tearful moments there. We discussed a bit about her late spouse and where she is in the grieving process, and I told her that I don't want to hurry her and that if she needs time, I'll wait as long as she needs me to. She says she feels like she's at a position where she can love again, that she's gone beyond feeling guilty for having emotions for me, which was a problem for her. She then brought up her sister as well as the obvious issues raised in the comments section. What would we do if X ever showed up around here again or tried to re-enter my children's lives? What if she returns transformed and apologetic? Would I accept her back? I told Sil that it was a no-brainer, that I'd forgiven her for cheating on me, but I'd never forgive her for what she did to my baby. Before his mother began cheating, using, and lashing out at him, he was a sunshiny and joyful youngster. He's doing better today, but his demeanor and negativity for someone so young bothered me for a long time. Sil was worried about how he would respond to her since, unlike our girls, he is mature enough to grasp everything. I urged her not to tell him since it would embarrass him, but he recently told me that he wanted his aunt was his mother instead. We claimed we were going to take it easy and not rush things, but the kissing resumed, and because we were in private this time, we gave up fighting to keep out of the bedroom. I'd had dreams of petting her face in the morning throughout the entirety of my affections for her, and this was one of them that I eventually got to play out. Moving ahead, we will develop date evenings and seek to strengthen our already solid foundation. When we finally inform our friends and family that we're a relationship, we're going to do it jointly. But that's where I'm at right now. That concludes my update. If this subreddit permits it, I could make another to discuss how the parents, in-laws, and children react to the news. After 2 years of hoping she was mine, she is now. This can't go wrong.